Hi, it's Schumann, coach to London Square Mile. Well, it's happening now. London is about to enter into its second lockdown. In this video, I want to talk about two core skills that will help us thrive in this time of adversity. And these are gratitude and adaptability. I know that many of you will be hugely frustrated that we are going into a second lockdown. You may even be angry and feel betrayed by the government. I totally get this, because for many of this will be more than just an inconvenience. It can be distressing, it can destroy our livelihood, and maybe the pandemic has already destroyed yours. So I think it's really important to acknowledge what this means for many of us. And at the same time, I believe it's also resourceful to maintain some degree of perspective. What do I mean by this? Well, I believe that every generation has its own challenge to master, and this is ours. In comparison, my generation and the younger generations have been having it relatively easy since the Second World War, if you compare it with what happened before in the last century. My family lost everything 4 times in the last century. First of all, in the First World War, then in the economic crisis in the 1930s, in the Second World War, and then again when they had to flee East Germany. Each time they had to start from zero because they lost everything. And of course, after the Second World War, the world was in shatters, cities destroyed, economies destroyed, and millions of people had lost their lives. Well, now we have our own challenge, and maybe the first learning from this crisis is to feel more grateful for the things that we took maybe for granted, maybe that we even feel entitled to have, and that we now no longer have, but hopefully regain soon again. Maybe it's time to be grateful to have a job, to have an employer who almost magically creates work and an income for us. Maybe it's time to be grateful to connect to our loved ones, to be able to enjoy the wonders of a city like London, a city with theatres, museums and galleries, places that are worthy of investing in. Maybe it's time to be grateful for having public spaces, parks that have now been our lifeline during the time of the pandemic, where we could still meet and exercise. Well, over the next 4 weeks, these things will be taken away from us again. And as I acknowledged at the beginning of this video, for many of us this will constitute severe hardship, and maybe as severe as my family suffered in some of those big events during the last century. So what can we do when we are faced with these events that are totally outside of our control? Well, the first thing is we can only really control what is in our control, and this is how we react to the crisis. This is where adaptability comes in. Being able to adapt to changing circumstances and environments is a key ingredient of success and survival. And we already had to adapt in many ways. We learned new ways of working, new ways of running a business, new ways of connecting, and new ways of keeping ourselves fit. And for some of us, we may even have to reach additional levels of adaptation. Maybe you work in one of those industries that have been hit the hardest: aviation, travel, hospitality, the arts. And maybe it's time considering moving over to some of those industries that are actually thriving in this difficult time. For example, technology. I've heard stories of teachers and bankers who learned coding, and artists who started working in call centers. For some of us, there may be a point where we realize that what got us to where we are right now will not be sufficient to get us through this crisis and beyond. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you're one of those people who have been considering a career change for quite a while, who have been yearning for a new challenge, for a second spring in your life, and you just needed a push to create it. Well, we do have a push now. If this was the beginning of your own hero story, what would you like the ending to be? I've heard great stories of people who created something new in this crisis, for example, setting up a new online business. And I've also heard stories of people who got really stuck in a negative mindset, who told me things like, oh, I'm just not an entrepreneur, or I just don't have a big enough network, or I've never had to look for my job, or I'm just an introvert, I can't do these things. But first of all these statements, they're not really facts. And even if there were facts, so what? Should that define us? Just because I'm not an entrepreneur, should that mean that I can't have a livelihood? I encourage my clients to move away from focusing on what they can't do and what's not possible to what they can do and what is possible. That's resourcefulness. If you're curious to explore what kind of opportunities you can create in this time of crisis, then let's have a chat. There's a link in the post to this video which you can use to book a free discovery call with me. And there's also another link that leads to an article in which I share a few ideas for things you can do during lockdown to create momentum for possibly a life-changing journey. That's all for today. Please stay safe and healthy, and I see you at the other side of the lockdown. Bye.